State Senator Brandon Creighton, thank you for joining us.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
You're out with a stern letter to university leaders across the state this week, explaining the requirements that they must comply with due to your new law, Senate Bill 17. I first want to ask why you felt the need to remind these chancellors and regents about their obligations. Did you see a lack of compliance so far? I know we've only been in this law for 3 months, but
Sure.
survey the land for us around the state.
Yeah, no, great question. Yes, we're working towards interim hearings, right, as the election cycle closes out and the runoffs are coming to sort of finality at the May 28th deadline. We're going to, for election night, we're going to quickly proceed into interim hearings. And as Senate Education has plans to advance charges for the rest of the interim, we felt it necessary to make sure that university leadership understands that the committee has very strong intentions to make sure that our new DEI ban is enforced. So yes, we sent what you phrased as a stern letter. I mean, I take it as certainly respectful rhetoric that we sent in their direction, but we want them to know that they'll be coming into hearings soon to talk about compliance.
You seem to give the impression that universities, some of them, may be trying to comply with the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. You said simply renaming offices of diversity, equity, and inclusion is not sufficient. Do you get the sense that universities are trying to preserve some of the intents of these DEI offices while still trying to comply on the margins?
Well, we have feedback from campuses all over the state on either progress with implementing the law as it's intended, or continuing efforts to, in some cases, subvert the intentions and the spirit of the law. So that's what the hearings are for, is just to get reports from university leadership and general counsel to make sure that those campuses are in compliance. There may be some things that we're learning about that they don't yet know about. I mean, these universities are huge, right, in their budgets and in their bureaucracy and in their efforts. So it's communication is the key, and I think that they're well-intentioned in following the law, but at the end of the day, we just have to make sure that they are.
And when you're working with these university leaders, are you getting the sense that some of these changes are welcome, or are you getting more pushback?
We have great relationships with leadership at each of our university campuses, our chancellors, our regents, the presidents of the university themselves. I get the sense that they want to follow the law and the spirit and intent of the law, but there are always differences of opinion on campus and different goals. Depending on the school, depending on the institution itself, and that's the case with this DEI ban. It's the case without it. We've got a much bigger and broader reform agenda than just DEI. We're listening to the public. We're making sure that our flagship universities and our taxpayer-funded public universities across the state stay strong, and that's our goal for the Senate Education Committee. We're in the oversight position. It's our obligation.
You wrote in this letter, elaborating on your intention behind Senate Bill 17, that SB 17 returns universities to a merit-based framework, ensuring every student and staff member is afforded equal opportunities and not silenced by DEI.
Right.
In your estimation, who and what were being silenced by DEI?
Well, we went through 8 hours of debate on the Senate floor on those examples, and 100 steps through the legislative process of almost a full year in regular sessions and special sessions to illustrate quite a bit of that. But in a nutshell, to just summarize, we had Asian American students that were being excluded from DEI strategies on public university campuses. We had political loyalty oaths required of university faculty applicants that were applying for jobs. We had examples like that in and of themselves was a chilling effect on free speech, right? And if you don't have free speech, you don't have inclusion. If you don't have inclusion, DEI falls. So It's our obligation and intent to make sure that as we're seeking diverse outcomes, that we don't bring the results that DEI offices were bringing, which is over 10 years of DEI across our public university landscape. University faculty were hiring, diverse university faculty hiring and minority faculty recruitment and hiring had gone backwards, had diminished over that 10 years. That's not what DEI offices were intended to be, and so we're moving that aside and starting over with new plans.
Is the main intent of this bill more directed at the hiring and the admissions side of inclusion and race-neutral policies, or is it broader than that? I want to give you an example. I think there is a sense among some students that this bill may have forced a bit of an overcorrection. I was on campus a couple months ago talking with students about how they're seeing this bill play out on campus. And I met a young Indian woman who participates in an Indian dance group. They, host fundraisers to showcase their culture, and they compete with other Indian dance groups. And she said that because of this bill, the university wasn't sure if they could fund that group anymore, and they were out of funding. Does that sound like the intention of this bill? Do you think that the university properly applied it in that sense?
I think that University General Counsel, depending on who they are and how narrow of a focus they have on interpreting certain provisions, they're going to be very cautious, right, on how they advise these campuses to comply. Certain affinity groups within the legislation, like you mentioned, they're protected under the bill. The bill certainly is from a much broader sense about faculty hiring, right? So, but there are provisions in the bill that make sure that mandatory pronoun training and some other things that were going on within these DEI units and strategies, that those can no longer be carried out, no matter what it's called. The nomenclature itself is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? But at the end of the day, the bill prevents the relaunching, renaming, and reauthorizing of those same efforts under a different umbrella. And I think the attorneys for these universities are being cautious in exactly what those provisions require, because funding for universities can be frozen if they're out of compliance.
So specific cultural groups for students that students may form themselves and then request university funding for, those would not fall under the purview of this ban. Is that your understanding?
I mean, I mentioned groups, affinity groups, right? When you go into requesting university funding, then there's going to be some strict guidance from the general counsel of those universities on how and what ways university funding, public taxpayer dollars, can be used. That's going to be up to the general counsel for those institutions to advise.
Do you get the sense that universities maybe just don't quite understand how to enforce this yet? Is that something that you may address in these May hearings?
It may be the case. I think that's why there are differing opinions on what counsel for one institution may offer forward as advice and what counsel for another institution may offer forward. But that's what our interim hearings are for, not just compliance checklists, but also to give guidance if there are questions along those lines.
I want to give you a chance to respond to some criticism as well, and it's nothing you haven't heard on the Senate floor before, but critics of this bill have argued that students and faculty have been playing on an uneven field for decades, right? I mean, the University of Texas didn't even accept a black student until the 1950s. And some people see diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts as a way to kind of level the playing field and include more of those historically disadvantaged groups. Do you worry about that criticism at all? What's your response to that?
Well, you can look at the breakdown of representation on our Texas public university campuses as it is today and see the incredible diverse student body across all of these campuses now. So I'm not as much worried about that, but what I am concerned about is hiring based on anything but merit. If we're not looking at merit, competence, work experience, prior education, if we're not looking at how that particular professor as an applicant is published, has brought research dollars to the university, and has a return on investment that we can count on. If those aren't the things that we're looking at first, merit-based hiring, then our higher education institutions are not going to be what the Texas taxpayer and what the public overall expects. It's not going to be a learning environment that we expect for our future workforce, and we're going to be at a disadvantage. So I think there's a misunderstanding that removing DEI units is somehow something other than a goal to advance forward with more diverse outcomes. Those are not linked together, right? We're going to continue to pursue diverse outcomes with student body applications and with professors that apply. But those were not being delivered as outcomes under DEI units. DEI units had absolutely failed in that regard and had weaponized in certain circumstances themselves against other minority student populations and applicants. So leftist political loyalty oaths, that is just not something that we can allow to be a requirement for new professors applying, where essentially we had a neon sign above the door of every HR department of every public university in the state that said, if you are moderate to conservative, you need not apply here. And that is not what DEI units were launched to accomplish.
Well, we'll be watching those May hearings and see how universities are responding and implementing this law. I want to make sure to touch on one more issue that you championed in the last session, the issue of school choice and education savings accounts. Quite the primary cycle for supporters of that. Are you more optimistic that you may be able to get that issue across to the governor's desk this next session?
Well, we passed it several times off the Senate floor, and
not so much in your chamber, I guess,
but in 2023. And don't mistake the Senate passing it several times as an indication that we didn't have our own, sort of heartfelt conversations about the best way to tailor the bill and the details and provisions. I don't want to say we made it look easy, but at the end of the day, Texas should be a state that offers moms and dads a choice for their kids and their specific education needs. We certainly shouldn't be following any state in America, as we would be the 32nd state in America to expand school choice, and the 8th or 9th to offer education savings accounts. And we should be out front on all education opportunities for our future workforce.
Your bill, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in my memory, it offered $8,000 to families based on income level and need, disabilities, things like that. Do you anticipate, if the House is friendlier to ESA's next session, that you may file a bill that is even more expansive?
Well, we had a universal education savings account bill as it passed off the Senate floor, but you're right, it was weighted towards a preference for the use of the dollars. 90% of the weighted formula benefited special needs kids and free and reduced lunch eligible students. And will the framework change based on faces in the legislature changing? I'm not so sure of that. I think that we were very proud of the bill that we had in place, and there may be variables or details that evolve as we negotiate with members of our chamber or with the House. We'll just have to see.
All right, State Senator Brandon Creighton, thank you for coming in.
Appreciate it. Thank you.